Amazing retired officer discovers two freezing puppies. What happens next is incredibly touching. Jack Thompson shuffled through the biting cold, his breath forming small clouds that dissipated into the morning air. He adjusted the collar of his worn jacket, a familiar weight around his shoulders. Each step resonated with echoes of laughter, his late wife's laughter, bouncing off the walls of their cherished home that now felt hollow. His routine, a comfort, ensconced him in familiarity, but it also clung to him like an old ghost. Yet today felt different. An unsettling shift rustled in the crisp air, gnawing at his heart as he wandered the quiet neighborhood that had once brimmed with warmth. Turning a corner, his eyes fell upon a flimsy cardboard box huddled by the curb, precariously placed as if waiting for a savior. Curiosity pulled him closer, little whispers of doubt surging through him. What could possibly lie within? As he knelt down, the sight jolted him. Two shivering puppies, their little bodies pressed tightly together for warmth, finding solace in each other's presence. The world around him faded away, leaving only a stark pang of urgency and compassion. They looked so small, so vulnerable, a perfect reflection of his own loneliness. What were they doing here? No time to wonder. Jack reached out, instinctively wrapping them in his jacket. The sensation of their trembling forms ignited something inside him, a flicker of purpose long extinguished by grief. Clutching the puppies, an unexpected weight settled on his heart. Caring for them unleashed a swirl of emotions, tugging at his soul. His late wife's voice reverberated in his mind, urging him toward kindness, a reminder that the act of nurturing was a connection that transcended loss. But with each puppy's hesitant gaze, he felt the suffocating squeeze of fear, the fear of attachment, of allowing himself to love again. Days turned into weeks. The puppies filled his dim home with joy. Yet Jack wrestled with a profound inner conflict. Laughter echoed in small doses, each bark reminding him of a warmth he had carefully locked away. But stresses wrapped around him, tightening like a vice. He found himself torn between tending to new life and the haunting shadows of his past. The thought of reprising the role of caretaker brought him to the precipice of anxiety. Could he endure losing again? Would they too leave like his beloved wife, drifting away into the ether, leaving a desolate imprint on his heart? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His instincts flickered to life once again when he noticed Clara, the quiet woman next door, tripping through her own struggles. Through thin walls, he had picked up on her soft cries echoing across the shared fence. The remnants of her vibrant spirit lay wilted, punctured perhaps by the abandonment of her dog left to fend for itself. It happened while he ached with his own neglected feelings. The lonely eyes of Clara's dog beckoned him, a silent plea intermingling with his own isolation. Gripped by the powerful drive of justice for the neglected animal, he found himself confronted with public judgment. Would his actions draw whispers from the neighbors, murmurs of disdain or pity? Standing on Clara's porch, he felt their gazes piercing him, shrinking him into their collective narrative of scorn. Jack craved connection, but sensed an overwhelming tide of societal expectation pulling against his good intentions. Each flicker of hope for community warmth turned colder, leaving him to brace against the gnawing yearning for acceptance. Clutching Clara's dog by one hand while the puppies wriggled in the other, he was running on the edge. While he tried to combat the isolation, he found himself on a precipice of vulnerability, questioning who knew compassion and who didn't. The weight of his efforts clashed with the tension that coated the air. Would he become an outcast for caring too much? His resolution solidified with a deeper tumult. He wasn't just holding on to the future of the animals, but also fighting for a lifeline, desperate for a flicker of understanding in a world growing progressively colder. The battle lines began to blur, leaving Jack teetering on the edge. A storm brewed in Jack's heart as he contemplated the weight of his choices, The unexpected presence of Clara's abandoned dog, now nestled against him, forced him to confront a truth he had buried deep within. He was not just saving the puppies, or even Clara's dog. He was fighting for his own spirit, his own reawakening. With every wag of the puppies' tails and the gentle nuzzle of the older dog by his side, a subtle yet fierce determination began to spring forth. He moved through the waves of anxiety that crashed upon him, acknowledging each surge of doubt. The glaring eyes of his neighbors no longer pinned him in guilt, but rather triggered a shift. Where once he felt threatened by their judgment, he now recognized their silent observations as a cue to embrace vulnerability. As dusk fell, painting the sky in fading hues of orange and purple, Jack began to clear a space in his living room for the pets. He discarded outdated remnants of his late wife's hobbies, books long untouched, decorative items collecting dust. Each item tossed away carried with it an emotional burden, but he pressed on, hungry for change, for evolution. This wasn't merely an act of cleaning. It was Jack reclaiming his space, a rejuvenation of spirit that resonated with every stride he took. Creating a warm corner for the puppies and Clara's dog ignited a rush of memories, his late wife's joy in crafting little havens for stray animals. Those moments returned, full of light, competing with shadows that had threatened to overtake him. He began to see the present through a lens that blended gratitude with hope, imagining a life lived for the dogs, and more importantly, for himself. Jack's newfound resolve pushed him to knock on Clara's door. He couldn't ignore the connection that hovered between their shared experiences, however strained. Misunderstanding, loneliness, despair. They carried a history of emotional burdens alike, but perhaps they could forge something new together. When Clara opened the door, her eyes reflected both surprise and uncertainty. She glanced at the bundle of lifelines nestled in Jack's arms. You took in the puppies? I couldn't leave them alone, he said, and I couldn't ignore what you were going through either. I know it's a lot, but maybe we could help each other. An uneasy silence enveloped them. Jack felt the tension of countless unspoken words. Clara's defenses, instantiated by loss, flickered through the air like a faint shadow, cast by the fading light behind her. I don't know, Jack, she responded softly. I've been so much alone, Me too, he interjected, his voice steady though it quaked internally. I've felt lost, but these puppies, they remind me that caring for someone, something, can bring back light. Her gaze softened as she stepped aside, ushering him into the entryway, and Jack's heart raced with a mix of hope and apprehension. As he and Clara exchanged stories, laughter mingled with shared discomfort. The walls that had enveloped their hearts began to crack. In those moments, Jack discovered a new capacity within himself, the ability to connect, to communicate, to confront the remnants of fear clinging to his spirit. But just as warmth began to spill into the corners of his life, a newcomer's growl echoed through the night, a reminder of unresolved pain. A shadowy figure emerged down the darkened street, and with it, an unsettling sense of foreboding washed over them. Clara reached for Jack's hand, and in that moment, they both knew this was only the beginning. What awaited them would test not just their bravery, but the very fabric of their commitment to rebuild together. The time had come to face more than loneliness. An unknown threat loomed nearer. Would they turn toward fear, or dare to embrace the challenge together? As the shadowy figure approached, Jack's heart pounded in his chest, outpacing the calm he had just begun to cultivate. The growl reverberated through their moment of connection, fracturing the tentative bond he had just started to forge with Clara. Instinctively, he tightened his grip on her hand, a visceral need to anchor both of them against the unknown. "Who is that?" Jack asked, his voice laced with tension. "There's been talk of a stray dog around here," Clara murmured, her eyes narrowing as she peered into the darkness. The sense of dread building between them was visceral, clinging to the air as they strained to see. With every step the figure took, Jack's resolve solidified. He was no longer the man trapped in the past, but a dedicated guardian intent on protecting Clara and the innocent lives in his care. Just a few short hours ago, he was lost in grief. But now, emboldened by this moment. He wasn't going to retreat into fear. "Stay behind me," he instructed Clara, his instincts kicking in, positioning himself between the threat and those he wished to protect. It was a small act of defiance, but it stirred a powerful surge of purpose within him, a recognition that he could stand firm against the chaotic forces that threatened to upend his newly found joy. The figure neared, revealing a scruffy, unkempt dog, its ribs protruding through its thin fur. Jack's heart broke at the sight. The growl morphed into a series of fearful whimpers. It appeared as battered and uncertain as Jack had felt for months. The storm brewing in him switched course, transforming into a force of compassion. "You're not alone either," he whispered, crouching down to the trembling creature. The dog flinched initially, its trust shattered by perhaps countless disappointments, yet there was a flicker of hope in its eyes. As Clara stepped up beside him, he felt a renewed sense of partnership. Together, they could bring the light back into each other's lives, starting with this lost animal. "Do you have anything we can use to coax him?" Jack asked quietly, trying to keep his voice calm. Clara nodded and rushed inside, returning moments later with a leftover sandwich. She held it out gently, her eyes glowing with determination. The dog inched forward, hesitantly taking the food. Jack, aware of Clara's simultaneous vulnerability and strength, let his heart swell with renewed admiration. It was here, in this small defining moment of kindness, that Jack recognized something profound about personal growth. He wasn't just rescuing another lost soul. He was simultaneously allowing himself to be rescued, embracing not just the act of giving, but the transformative power it held. As the dog consumed the food, Jack found himself smiling, the fear dissipating to be replaced with a sense of belonging, an understanding that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a passage toward healing. But then, like a cold slap, a realization struck him. This little moment of joy could be cruelly brief in the face of their looming, shared uncertainties. The once distant, shadowy fears that had driven them both into isolation were now manifesting in this encounter. What if they couldn't foster the connection needed to move forward? What if their efforts faltered beneath the weight of their pasts? "Clara," he said, locking eyes with her, studying her expression with a sense of urgency. "We can't let fear win. Not this time. Not ever again." But just then, the streetlight flickered ominously, a reminder that darkness could swallow them whole at any moment. Jack felt the tension wrap around them like a vice, the past creeping in from the edges of their newfound connection. "Jack," Clara whispered, her voice trembling, aware that what lay ahead might dismantle everything. The air thickened with unsaid worries, and the lingering growl from the night beneath the fading light foretold of further calm that could precede chaos. Uncertainty loomed, threatening to unravel what they had patched together, as the night was just beginning to thicken. Would their attempt to restore each other's hope endure? Or would the shadows that first drew them together pull them apart? As the streetlight flickered one last time, Jack took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on him. He had stepped up when it mattered most, yet the very essence of their shared vulnerability left him teetering on the brink of uncertainty. Clara remained at his side, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of the stakes involved. Together, they confronted their past, but that would not ensure a harmonious future. He turned back to the scruffy dog, who had abandoned fear for hunger, munching on the sandwich with an urgency that was almost desperate. Watching the creature reclaim its autonomy, Jack recognized a mirror to his own journey. He had spent too long feeling reduced, grappling with guilt, and now he had a choice: to break free from shackles of self-doubt, or slip back into the familiar shadows of despair. "Maybe we should take him home with us," Clara suggested, her voice firm yet laced with concern. "He needs help, just like us," Jack finished, his eyes locking onto hers. The sincerity in Clara's expression was a vital reminder that they were not alone in confronting their demons. "Yes," he said slowly, cautious but determined. "He deserves a chance, and maybe, so do we." The moment crystallized, turning his trepidation into action. Jack shifted his focus from the darkness around them to the warmth gathering in the beat of his heart. As he rose to his feet, an instinct channeled through him, igniting a dormant fire fueled by purpose. He felt alive again, revitalized by vulnerability in a way he had never anticipated. But just as quickly, a cloud of uncertainty rolled in. What if taking the dog in meant exposing Clara, and himself, to even more pain? In the past, his protective instincts had faltered, leading to loss and regret. Would this be another misstep fueled by blind optimism? "Talk to me, Jack," Clara said, her tone probing. "What's going through your mind?" "I'm worried," he confessed, the words tumbling out despite his careful facade. "What do we do when we stumble? When our resolve fizzles in the dark?" Clara stepped closer, her soothing aura a testament to resilience. "We face it. Together. Just like we're doing now with him." Her words resonated, echoing through Jack's thoughts. They were blending their strengths and emotions, confronting fear as a unified front. That connection forged not just in their present situation, but as allies against the fragments of their pasts. It was both challenging and exhilarating. The dog finished, their shared mission unsaid, but understood. Gently, Jack reached out, feeling the warm fur beneath his touch. The fragile creature looked up at him with curiosity, uncondemned, seeking solace. "Let's name him Hope," Clara suggested. Jack nodded, the name encapsulating all they yearned for: resilience, spirit, a path forward. As Jack looked down at the dog, he felt a sudden urge to plunge deeper into this commitment, transforming his role as protector into one of nurturer. It was a crucial step, a small yet pivotal action that would serve as a foundation for their recovery. They were embarking on this new chapter, charged with an unspoken promise to bring each other to blossoming heights. Yet with that new determination came the undeniable reality of future obstacles. Jack's newfound resolve wrestled against the realities that lay ahead. What if trying to save the dog, to save each other, stripped them bare instead? "Let's go home," he said, voice firm but edged with uncertainty. As they turned, a low growl echoed again from the shadows, warning him that the past still clawed at their heels. Jack's heart raced as the familiar fear flooded back, threatening to upend the fragile trust he was working to build with Clara. Would their attempt at redemption stand against the tidal wave of buried wounds? Would love and responsibility be strong enough to counter the shadows lurking in the corners of their intertwined destinies? The night thickened around them, and with each step toward the warmth of their home, Jack could feel a foreboding tension rising, hinting that the hardest battles lay just ahead. The future was pulling him toward unknown trials yet to come, where he and Clara would confront not only the darkness outside their doors, but also the shadows within. As they walked, Jack's heart beat in rhythm with the tension that crackled around them. Each step toward home felt laden with unspoken fears, a combination of hope and dread intertwining as closely as Clara's hand was wrapped around his. He felt the weight of their decision, a chosen responsibility for not just the dog, but for the fragile bond he was beginning to explore with Clara. Jack glanced down at Hope, who trotted alongside them, oblivious to the storm brewing in Jack's mind. The dog's bright eyes hinted at innocence and possibility, reminding him of the untainted opportunities that still lay ahead. But with that clarity came the whisper of past pitfalls, a cacophony of internal voices urging him to reconsider. What if he was not equipped to nurture another being after all? He had barely managed to fend for himself in his struggles. How could he extend his strength to this new life? Clara broke into his reverie, her voice a soft melody cutting through the clamor. "You know, I think we made the right choice. Taking him in is a step toward healing, for all of us." Did she sense his internal struggle? The question hung heavy in the air, mingling with the cool night breeze. Jack longed to dispel his doubts. After all, Clara's confidence had always rallied him, gently prodding him to step into the light. "Do you really believe that?" he asked, daring to confront what seemed like an insurmountable wall of insecurity within himself. "Absolutely," she replied, infectious fervor coloring her words. "Sometimes, we have to take that leap, even if it terrifies us. Her belief was a lifeline, and suddenly, he recognized that this was not just an external commitment to hope. It was a declaration of faith in themselves. He realized the shift in their journey was not merely about saving the dog, but about crafting a new narrative, one where they could flourish. Perhaps this wasn't about avoiding failure, but embracing the uncertainty entwined with their growth. As if sensing the gravity of the moment, Hope paused, looking up at Jack with an eagerness that mirrored his own growing resolve. This small creature, abandoned and in need, evoked something inside him, a flicker of the potential to extend beyond himself and experience love and vulnerability in its unfiltered joy. They reached their apartment, the dim light spilling from the window illuminating their hesitant faces. Jack hesitated before unlocking the door. It wasn't just an entry into their home, but a threshold into unfamiliar territory, an invitation to face their struggles together. "Jack," Clara began, her voice steady, "we're ready for this. No matter what happens, we'll figure it out as we go. Promise?" Jack met her gaze, fortified by her steadfast conviction. "I promise." It felt like a vow not only to Clara but to himself, to embrace uncertainty and to evolve rather than recoil in fear. Inside, the apartment felt warm and inviting. Yet Jack was struck by how it also represented the stark contrast between their hopeful present and the uncertainties looming just beyond their threshold. As he knelt to place Hope's bowl on the floor, the dog circled excitedly, his tail wagging with electric enthusiasm. Watching this playful display reignited something deep in him. Every wag heralded a fresh start, an opportunity to approach life with unguarded optimism, and yet the underlying threat of what lay ahead loomed large. "Let's take turns caring for him," Clara suggested, crouching beside him. "It'll help keep us accountable, remind us why we started this." The notion lodged itself in Jack's thoughts, inspiring clarity. Accountability was essential for their development, both as individuals and a united front. They would foster hope, but also reinforce each other's weaknesses, ensuring they wouldn't return to their previous selves. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed outside, a fallen branch or perhaps something more sinister. Jack stiffened, every instinct screaming danger, an old reflex surfacing. Clara's reassuring touch on his arm served as a reminder to ground himself. "This is a new chapter," he murmured, steeling his resolve even as the outside darkness whispered of threats. Would they remain in this light? That question lingered dangerously as Jack realized that real growth often meant standing firm against the shadows that threatened to consume them. Tomorrow would bring its own trials, but tonight they would hold the light together, for hope, for each other, and for their future. As the wind howled outside, Jack could sense another pivotal moment. A choice was looming on the horizon, demanding a confrontation with the unseen forces still gripping his past. Would he be ready to face them? The morning light seeped cautiously through the curtains, barely illuminating the remnants of their night's resolve. Jack lay awake, Hope's gentle snoring a comforting backdrop to his racing thoughts. With each passing minute, the weight of their decision settled deeper, imbuing the air with a blend of anticipation and uncertainty. Today marked the beginning of a new rhythm, one they were yet to define. He rolled over to glance at Clara, still lost in slumber, her face softened by the morning light. A swell of affection surged within him. Her unwavering belief in their ability to nurture hope was infectious, yet it clashed violently with the persistent doubts that lapped at the edges of his mind. Was he truly capable of fostering a life when he often felt lost himself? Jack struggled to reconcile these feelings of inadequacy with his own desire for growth. With a sigh, he slid out of bed, careful not to disturb Clara. The apartment was tranquil, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside him. As he moved through their small space, he reflected on the agreement they had made last night to share responsibility. It was a step toward accountability, a necessary element for both the dog and themselves. Still, the enormity of what lay ahead felt overwhelming. After a quick breakfast, Jack found himself on the floor with Hope, who was desperately trying to chew on an old shoelace. Watching the dog's joyful antics sparked a flicker of inspiration. Perhaps his engagement with Hope could become a means of self-discovery, or even self-redemption. The realization energized him, and he began questioning how to transform the notion of simply being a caretaker into something more profound. "I need to do this right," he whispered to himself, determination forming a budding plan in his mind. He pulled out an old book from his college days about canine behavior, flicking through its dog-eared pages. There was an undeniable thrill in anticipating the ways he would strive not just to care for Hope, but to deepen his own understanding of responsibility, empathy, and companionship. Clara's voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. "What are you up to over there?" she chirped, propping herself on her elbows with a sleepy smile. "Trying to figure out how I can be the best dog dad possible," Jack replied, feeling an uncharacteristic spark of enthusiasm. Their eyes locked, and a sense of renewed purpose filled the air. Clara joined him on the floor, enthusiastic about the journey they were embarking upon together. They spent the morning exploring various training techniques, discussing their expectations, and balancing their shared visions for Hope. Jack was surprised at how easily the conversation flowed, their laughter dissipating the remnants of anxiety that had enveloped him. However, as they engaged in their planning, an underlying shadow gnawed at Jack's resolve. The echoes of his past mistakes and unsatisfactory choices loomed like specters, constantly reminding him of the fragile nature of his newfound purpose. Would he crumble under the pressure, or would he persist in his commitment to better himself alongside Clara and Hope? As afternoon broke, Clara suggested they take Hope out for a walk, a chance to introduce him to the bustling world outside. "A good dog needs to experience life, and so do we," she said, and the statement resonated with Jack deeply. Perhaps the time had come for him to begin confronting the boundaries he had set for himself, much like teaching a dog to fetch a ball. With a determination ignited by her words, Jack grabbed Hope's leash and coupled it with a smile full of newfound conviction. As they stepped outside, the cacophony of sounds enveloped him, the laughter of children, the distant hum of traffic, and the rustling of leaves. Each sound felt like a call to action, a reminder that he had a chance to redefine not only his relationship with Hope, but also his very understanding of himself. Yet, as they wandered into a nearby park, Jack's attention was drawn abruptly to a group of unimposing figures standing under a tree. Something about their stillness stirred an unease within him, a sense that they might be the catalyst he had feared, individuals tethered to old memories and discomfort. What if they recognized him? What if they brought his insecurities rushing back? The team of uncertainties crept into his mind like a shroud of fog as they approached. Jack felt an instinctive pull to retreat, but Clara's hand tightened reassuringly around his arm. "Stay close," she murmured, grounding him. Jack's heart pounded, teetering on the edge of confrontation with the specters of his past. Would he step forward, challenge himself to confront what once held him captive? The uncertainty loomed, and he realized the pivotal decision lay before him once again. Would he choose to engage and grow, or retreat into the shadows? As Clara moved on, unaware of the battle unfolding behind his eyes, Jack felt the choice crystallize in an instant. The moment of truth was approaching. Before Jack could second-guess himself, he felt Clara's presence beside him, a steady force against the tumult that swirled in his mind. The group of figures remained stationary under the tree, the sun casting elongated shadows that seemed to converge on Jack. He gripped the leash more tightly, feeling Hope tugged forward with innocent enthusiasm, unencumbered by the weight of memory. Clara glanced at him, her brow knitted with concern. "You okay?" He could feel his heart racing against the very pull of his insecurities. This wasn't just a reconnection with his past. It was a reckoning with who he chose to be today. "Yeah, He hesitated but took a deep breath, realizing that to step back would only fuel the narrative he sought to escape. "Let's go say hi." Without waiting for a response, Jack strode ahead, legs moving almost on instinct. As they drew closer, he recognized familiar faces that stirred fragments of reminiscence both warm and bitter. A few heads turned, and he braced himself against the torrent of self-doubt rushing through him, threatening to unseat the newfound resolve he had experienced that morning. "Jack, it's been a while." One of them, a guy from his old high school, stepped forward with a tentative smile. "How've you been?" Hey, yeah. Things are good, Jack replied, forcing a grin that felt somewhat disingenuous. The words hung in the air, tasting foreign in his mouth. As they exchanged pleasantries, Jack's mind raced, combing through their shared history, dredging up moments he had long since tucked away. There were times when he had faltered, moments in the past when he had submerged himself in uncertainty. This gathering had once represented an arena of judgment, an unending spotlight on his failures. Yet today, he had Clara and Hope by his side, constants that anchored him amidst the chaos of his swirling emotions. He felt a growing sense of agency, an urge to anchor this bravado in reality. Maybe he could redefine these relationships. "We just got a dog," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Hope." He gestured towards the ecstatic animal, whose energy seemed to electrify the group. "We're learning together." As he spoke those words, he saw the surprise on their faces, a curious mixture of admiration and disbelief. Was he really embracing responsibility? The thrill of possibility surged within him. "Lucky dog," another voice chimed in, capturing what Jack had felt himself. Hope, oblivious to the significance of the moment, frolicked among his former peers, breaking the tension with the joy of unrestrained innocence. Jack shrugged. "Yeah, I guess we're lucky. It's been a challenge, but—" The weight of his unfinished thoughts slipped through an unguarded moment. "I really needed it." As he acknowledged his own turmoil, the collective shared history before him transformed into a platform for growth, not a haunting reminder. Their laughter mingled as they shared stories, but Jack remained acutely aware of the dual mission unfolding within him. He was not just speaking about hope, he was reclaiming his own narrative. Clara watched him, her smile encouraging, a beacon illuminating the path ahead while the specters of his past faded into the backdrop. When the conversation shifted, allowing Jack to catch his breath, he realized that this unexpected encounter had shifted something fundamental inside him. He wasn't just a hesitant caretaker stepping into a new role. He was a man navigating the intricacies of his identity, embracing resilience rather than evading his past. With renewed vigor, Jack glanced at the group with newfound clarity. The moment had shifted from reeling in anxiety to exuding a quiet confidence. He could feel the warmth of acceptance radiating from Clara, bolstering his evolution. Yet, uncertainty still lay just beneath the surface. These relationships could serve as a reminder of how far he had fallen, and still, the potential for connection flickered quietly, inviting him to linger. Just as he was ready to voice a deeper truth about his journey, Jack spotted another group approaching. Their presence sent a rush of unease coursing through him. He recognized a few familiar faces, yet others bore vigilant expressions that sparked a chill in his spine. Was he ready for this new wave of confrontation? Would this be the defining moment that ultimately propelled him forward? Or would he, under their scrutiny, retreat into shadow once again? As thoughts clashed inside, Jack's conflicting emotions surged. Would he meet this challenge head-on and embrace the potential for transformation, or would he slip back into the remnants of fear? The crowd before him now felt heavier as he prepared to make yet another choice. A choice that threatened to shape not only Hope's future but his own, deeper than he had ever anticipated. Jack felt the grip of anxiety tighten around him as he recognized members of a group he had hoped never to encounter again. The faces emerging from the shadows of his past seemed to pull him backward, threatening to rekindle old insecurities that he had just begun to confront. They stood with an air of expectation, and with each step they took toward him, Jack's resolve wavered. He felt Hope tugging on the leash, her excitement oblivious to his growing trepidation. She was a reminder, a symbol of his current life, the life he wanted to embrace. Her simple joy contrasted sharply against the anxious knot forming in his stomach. "Focus," he repeated internally, pressing through the swirling doubts. "Jack, it's been ages!" one of the newcomers exclaimed, smiling broadly yet with an edge of familiarity that made Jack uneasy. "We heard you finally got your act together." The word stung, though Jack forced a smile in response. That barb felt like an echo of the past, resurfacing all the shame he had worked so hard to override. The duality of his existence clashed visibly. He was both the man grappling with self-doubt and a man hoping to carve out a new narrative. "Yeah, I've been busy," he replied cautiously, choosing to ignore the undertone. He could feel Clara observing him intently, her encouraging presence a lifeline amid the turbulence. This was his moment to pivot. But how deeply did he want to engage with these faces that saturated his memories? Hope leapt around with abandon, startling Jack from his thoughts. "She's adorable," one woman said, kneeling to pet Hope. Jack watched her, puzzled by the simplicity of her admiration. It was as though Hope represented everything he coveted, unrivaled innocence and untainted clarity. "Yeah, she really brightens things up," Jack admitted, surprised by the confession slipping out. "We're still getting used to each other. It's been a learning curve." The admission lightened the air around him, reestablishing his instinct to claim ownership of his experiences. "Learning, huh?" The man who had spoke earlier pointedly raised an eyebrow. "I suppose life's a series of lessons, isn't it? We all learned the hard way." There was a knowing in his voice that hinted at shared mistakes. Jack felt prickles of discomfort dancing at the edge of his consciousness. Familiarity often disguised judgment. He could feel Clara shift beside him, sensing the tension, yet he chose to engage. "Yeah, it definitely is," Jack responded, testing the waters, keenly aware that his next words could either shatter or solidify this newfound confidence. "I've made some mistakes, but I'm also realizing that they're part of the process." As he articulated this, he surprised himself. He was no longer just echoing platitudes he'd felt forced to repeat. He was now speaking from a place of understanding. The surprise on their faces was palpable, and in that moment, Jack felt an unexpected surge of empowerment. Could he really shift the dynamic? Could he reshape the narrative they all shared? His heart raced with the thought, propelling him forward. Perhaps the challenge lay not in confronting them about the past, but in presenting who he was now. The notion ignited a flame within, shifting the atmosphere surrounding him from one of foreboding to possibility. "I've been focused on developing a healthier environment for myself. And for Hope." He gestured towards the dog, whose unrestrained spirit seemed to inspire the group without him having to say another word. Their expressions softened slightly, and Jack grasped this fragile shift as an opportunity to redefine the interactions that had once left him fragile. The urge to retreat into silence flickered, but he resisted the impulse, finding strength in the authenticity of his words. The conversation drifted, revealing gaps in the past he thought could never be bridged. But with each exchange, Jack felt the barriers before him diminish, if only slightly. Yet deep down remained a throbbing reminder of the enormity of self-discovery and comparison he still faced. Just as a tentative camaraderie began to bloom amid laughter and light-hearted banter, a familiar face from even deeper within his history sidled up to the group. Jack's stomach dropped. This was a figure he'd soon have to confront, one that held tightly to old narratives he desperately needed to release. Would Jack continue to rise and embrace the realities of who he was becoming? Or would the shadow of his past tempt him to retreat into the remnants of his history? Jack's breath hitched as the figure approached, a reminder of the life he had abandoned yet still couldn't seem to escape. Kyle, with his familiar smug grin and the swagger of someone who had never faced their own demons, was quickly cutting through the laughter that had just enveloped Jack like a warm blanket. "Look who it is, Mr. Change," Kyle drawled, his tone laced with mock admiration. "I almost didn't recognize you without the baggage." The laughter of the group dwindled, clinging nervously to the edges of Jack's consciousness as they awaited his reaction. The moment hung suspended in the air. Jack could sense Clara's tension beside him, her eyes darting between him and Kyle, and he could imagine the unspoken support she was offering. "Don't let him get to you." "Funny, isn't it? You talk about change, but the same old Kyle hasn't left the room." Jack felt the edges of his confidence begin to fray, but he forced himself to stand tall. The history between them was complicated. Flashes of shared memories surfaced, each steeped in regret, mistrust, and the weight of lost time. Not all of us need to cling to the past, Kyle, Jack replied, his voice steadying as he embraced the shift he had begun to cultivate within himself. Some of us are focused on moving forward. Kyle's smirk faded slightly, a flicker of confusion passing over his features as Jack's words sank in. It was almost like watching him fall from grace, and Jack found a strange exhilaration at the prospect. For so long, he had wanted either Kyle's acceptance or his disdain. This moment, however, was about asserting his own value rather than seeking validation. Hope sensed the tension, and responding to Jack's emotional surge, tugged playfully at the leash as if attempting to pull him back into her innocent world of joy. Jack knelt to pet her, that simple act grounding him in his purpose. "Hope deserves better than this," he said, looking back to the group, eyes focused, body steady. "We all do." Kyle blustered, momentarily stripped bare of his bravado. "So this is your big transformation? Hiding behind the dog? How cliché," he scoffed, trying to regain his foothold. Jack felt the anger simmer beneath Kyle's comments, knowing too well that this was an attempt to manipulate him into the familiar cycle of insecurity. "No," Jack countered, feeling the heat of determination rise. "This is the first step in choosing to reject narratives that don't serve us." There it was, the knowledge that had eluded him for so long, that he held the power to rewrite his story, to confront not just Kyle, but the segments of himself that felt weak or unworthy. Jack's heart raced, no longer just from anxiety, but from the thrill of asserting himself. Having prepared for this interaction, an effort long overdue, he felt solidified in his footing. The complexity of each word was grounded in the real work he had begun. The therapy sessions, the journaling, the long contemplative walks with Hope. They had built a foundation that served him now. Kyle's expression shifted from mockery to something darker, and for a moment, Jack felt the ominous weight of impending trouble. The familiar instinct to retreat tugged at him, but this time something else sparked within him, a fierce refusal to yield. "I can't say I'm proud of our past, Kyle," Jack declared, utilizing the strength of honesty and vulnerability in tandem. "But I am proud of where I'm headed. I'm no longer the person you think I am." The air between them crackled with tension, Kyle's smug demeanor slowly crumbling before Jack's newfound conviction. There was unresolved conflict in their chemistry, a fight that had hardly begun and needed addressing before it could conclude. As the murmurs resumed among the group, unsure of where to steer their attention, Jack felt grounded, ready for the possibility of confrontation. He braced himself for whatever Kyle might unleash next, ready to face the darkness of his past. Just then, a flash of realization struck Jack. What if Kyle represented more than just an antagonist from his history? What if engaging with him could serve as a crucial turning point in his personal growth? The stakes had risen, and with them so had his determination. As the atmosphere thickened, Jack understood it was no longer about survival or avoidance. He was on the precipice, grappling with the effects of unresolved tension, and now, more than ever, he needed to decide how to confront his past, along with its lingering grasp. This was it. The moment of truth loomed closer, beckoning him to step into the unknown. Would he rise to the challenge, or falter under the weight of his memories? Jack faced Kyle, the tension simmering in the air, as if poised for an eruption. Every mocking word from his former classmate ignited a spark of determination in Jack. He was not the same man who had once floundered beneath Kyle's ridicule. He had endured too much on his journey towards healing, and he refused to allow past shadows to creep back into his life. Cliché? Maybe. But it's my story, Kyle, and I'm the one writing it now, Jack said, his voice steady and firm. The weight of his past mistakes no longer suffocated him. Rather, they empowered him to forge his own path. Kyle's expression shifted from smugness to incredulity. Jack saw the flicker of confusion warring within him. This wasn't the response he expected. Jack took a step closer, encouraged by a surge of confidence that swelled from deep within. He thought of Hope, who had already taught him the transformative nature of stepping outside oneself, to embrace love, vulnerability, and responsibility. "You don't get to define me anymore," Jack continued, feeling the strength of Clara's presence beside him. Her silent support fortified his courage and kept the memories of his late wife alive in his heart, whispering encouragement. I'm working hard to reclaim my life, and it starts with believing I'm worth it. The gathering fell into a hushed silence, hanging on Jack's every word as he shed the remnants of his old self. With each syllable, he could feel the grip of the past loosening, the weight of expectation lifting. His honesty laid bare not just his struggles, but his growth. He was no longer anchored by the man who once bowed to judgment. Step back, Kyle finally muttered, frustration evident as he maintained a facade of indifference. You think this is turning your life around? Don't kid yourself. Jack met Kyle's gaze, refusing to back down. No, Kyle. I'm not kidding myself anymore. You don't know the struggles I've faced, but I've learned that growth involves confronting those struggles head-on. A murmur passed through the onlookers, many of whom exchanged glances that reflected surprise and newfound respect. The tide was turning, and Jack sensed the shift. This moment was not only about Kyle, but about every step he had taken to overcome. Realizing he had the audience's attention, Jack seized the opportunity to weave his journey into the fabric of this encounter. It hasn't been easy. I lost a part of myself that was silent and fearful, and deeply afraid. But that doesn't mean I'm bound to those experiences forever. Hope wagged her tail at his feet, reminding him of the untainted joy he had found in nurturing her. Now, with Clara and Hope by my side, I am learning what it means to embrace vulnerability. I'm not afraid to extend my heart to something good, something real. Kyle's bravado cracked, and his posture faltered as Jack continued to expose the fragments of who he truly was. The confrontation had started as an exercise in reclaiming personal agency, and had transformed into something monumental, Jack's declaration of growth. The other figures around them stood transfixed. Jack felt their recognition creeping in. In that instant, it became evident that this interaction was not merely about addressing the past or defending against judgment. It was a manifestation of his journey toward self-acceptance. In a moment both exhilarating and terrifying, Jack dared to welcome the vulnerability that had previously held him captive. I don't expect you to understand what this means to me, but I'm no longer the version of myself who seeks approval. I'm evolving every day, and as part of that journey, I'm learning to forgive, not just others, but myself too. Faced with his declaration, Kyle blinked in disbelief, his bravado shrinking under scrutiny. Jack held his ground, feeling the strength of Clara's hand squeezing his, and the warmth of hope nudging against his leg. No more did Jack feel the weight of judgment. He had taken a powerful step forward, proving that vulnerability was not a chink in his armor, but a vital piece of who he was now. Kyle's front faltered further, his response faltering. I don't get the whole personal growth thing, but if this is what works for you. There was a hint of defeat in his tone, an acknowledgement that this wasn't the confrontation Kyle envisioned. Jack seized on that realization, thankful for the small yet powerful victory. Understanding comes in time, but right now, I'm not afraid to step into my truth, and I suggest you take a hard look in the mirror too. As Kyle stepped back, defeated, Jack's heart soared. He had done it. He had reconquered not just his former fears, but a piece of himself hidden beneath guilt and uncertainty for far too long. It was a definitive stand against the judgment that once paralyzed him. The crowd began to disperse around them. Warm senses of approval washed over him. Clara brushed closer to his side, her eyes dancing with pride. You really did it, she murmured. With Hope panting eagerly, the weight that had once pressed so heavy upon his shoulders now felt delightfully light. Jack had learned to reclaim his life, to establish boundaries where there once were none, and to embrace the narrative that belonged solely to him. Today marked not only his growth, but the moment he showcased his unwavering capacity for change and healing. Each step forward with Clara and Hope illuminated a bright path ahead, one filled with resilience, connection, and boundless possibility. As Jack looked into the horizon, he understood that this was just the beginning. The lessons would keep coming, the struggles would still arise, but they would no longer dictate his worth or define the life he sought. He had conquered the silence, found his voice, and emerged victorious. Jack felt a sense of peace settling within him, a harmonious blend of acceptance and unwavering confidence. And as hope nuzzled at his side, he knew one thing for sure. He would continue to write his own story, no matter how challenging the path ahead appeared. Time for him to build a future filled with love, laughter, and unwavering resilience. Jack had finally stepped into the life he was meant to lead, and nothing, not even the whispers from his past, could ever extinguish that flame again. If you've resonated with Jack's journey and the powerful message of personal growth, it's crucial for you to take action now. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. You need to support these impactful narratives. Comment your thoughts and theories about Jack's journey. Your engagement matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Every act of sharing spreads hope. This is the moment to show your support. Let's elevate the power of personal overcoming stories together. Don't wait even one more second.